It's Carla and Liam here from Games, Brains and a Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for sure. And it's getting Goosebumps. Of course, we are making our way through season 2. And we now reach Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, the 8th episode of season 2 of this TV series. It's the 34th book in the original Goosebump book series, first published this one in 1995. We're going back to some old favorites here, as it's directed by William Fruitt, who does a lot in season 2 and did a lot in season 1. And it's also written by Charles Lazier, another regular writer that appears for this show. Cool. I don't really remember this book at all, but I kind of get why based off the episode, because the episode for me is utterly forgettable and just a variation on Night of the Living Dummy.
Yeah, there's definitely similarities, so I can see why they would kind of blur into one a little bit. Yeah,
this is one where 22 minutes felt like super short because just not a lot actually happens at all. Right. It's got like Goosebumps. It's very much the style of Goosebumps. You see everything that's coming, and then they throw in a horror base. Look at this twist at the end, you know.
Yeah, I mean, just based on the title alone, you can probably make your own like assumptions of where it's potentially going to go, and it does go in quite the most predictable direction, you know. Yeah.
Talking about predictability, we begin with an opening shot of an idyllic home on an idyllic street with that upbeat music, and you're like, oh, this feels very fucking familiar. We then get siblings, a brother and sister, playing catch. Angrily, should I say. They keep sniping at each other. We have Mindy, Kerry Segal, and Joe, played by Lance Patton.
When we first started doing this whole like thing, you should have started a counter in the top corner or something that does every time there's like a trope, because there's so many different ones in Goosebumps. And obviously we've talked about the sibling rivalry trope that's in every episode, and it starts off with that straight away. Yeah.
This one is a trope heavy one, from the sibling rivalry to one of the kids only seeing the incidents and not being believed by the parents, to all of that stuff. It's all here. But yeah, so they're throwing ball, and Mindy throws the ball too hard and it ends up in the flowers of their neighbor. We instantly get the idea that the kids are worried that it landed in their neighbor's house, implying that whoever lives there isn't a particularly nice person and getting the ball will be difficult. Joe decides, look, I've lost too many things, so he decides to go and get the ball, but runs into the owner, who turns out to be an uptight military man called Major McCall, played by David Hembelin. He takes the ball, declaring it is his, and Joe tells Joe to stay out of his garden. You get that whole military thing with the beating music, you know, the marching music and the outfit and the look, and the way the camera's shot where it's down low, so he's supposed to be an imposing figure. You know, I feel like we've seen this character a ton in films full stop.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's like just this like staff sergeant type, you know, very like ticks all the like cliche boxes type character.
Now it's mine. You stay out of my garden.
Go back to Mary Poppins back in the day on Disney, and you know, you have the neighbor who's an ex-seaman and still like living the character.
Yeah, and like another trope that's you start noticing more and more as watch Goosebumps is there's always like that eccentric character that's played by an adult actor, and then that's another really running one. There's always that one character that's clearly been cast this eccentric actor, and he plays this weird character, and there's always one of them. And also another one that I noticed in this episode, because as you watch the episode, you really start to notice them, especially when you're older. Maybe as a young child, you're not going to notice them at all. But another one is his father is like this nerdy guy, and like the nerdy father who's like kind of clueless and a bit dopey is like another very like that happens quite a lot in these episodes.
Yeah, the one thing this one does differently, though, is up to about 3/4 of its runtime, I thought we were like, oh, we're doing a single father thing here. There's no wife or mother in the scene.
That'd be different.
She randomly appears, and you're like, oh, she is here.
Yeah, and it's not always necessary to have the two parents, because more often than not, like the parents don't really do anything anyway. They're kind of like bit part characters, so you could just have like the one. That'd be different.
It would be different, you're right. But yeah, the kid's father, played by Peter Callaghan, he comes home and he's really excited about his latest lawn ornaments. You know, Joe tries to tell him about the ball, and he's like, look, I'm not going to start a war over a ball. Ha ha ha. War, military, stuff like that. And he says, look, if it landed in his garden, it's gone. He then unveils the garden gnomes, the lawn gnomes he bought. And like, I vaguely remember a picture of the front cover of this book, and I could have swore they were supposed to be like what you would expect a lawn gnome to look like, about that big.
Yeah, small, yeah.
Yeah. These things are like fucking half, these are the size of the children. These are half the size of an adult height.
Yeah, I think like once you see what the gnomes turn into, that's like why they did that, probably because they couldn't figure out how to, they didn't want, I mean, they could have done terrible looking CGI tiny little gnomes running around, but maybe that just looked, maybe they tried that and it looked terrible or something, who knows.
You may be absolutely right, because it's quite clear what they do later on. They're big, they're ugly looking, and tropes, we're talking about tropes, we follow the same system where early on in the Goosebumps episode, you get something that is designed to be a scare, where the screen always fades out. And this episode might do the worst one, I think, just the dumbest, where it's pointless, as Joe tries to turn one, but it falls on him, and it's trying to imply like it's attacking him, and he's panicking. And then the garage door randomly closes, and it's like, it feels so stupid. It feels so forced.
They're always stunned like in the first like 2 minutes, and it's like there's no way that this is kicking off this quickly. It never does. You know, they should do that once in an episode where it does kick off that quickly, just immediately, like the gnomes or whatever it is comes to life and starts attacking someone right off the bat, because that would be like surprising, but it's never the case, you know.
Nope, because when we come back in, Joe is just helped up from underneath the gnome that fell on him, you know.
Come on, Joe, stop horsing around, huh?
He doesn't like him. Mindy does. That's about it. You know, father's like, okay, let's put him in the garden, and they're putting him in the garden. We get kind of a view of this garden where it's just filled with, let's be honest, trash.
Yeah.
Absolute trash, man. McCall sees them and begins to insult the family's garden. And we get now the crux of this episode, which is their rivals in some sort of summer garden award. It makes sense, these sort of things happening in small towns where it's like, oh, every year we come around and judge your house, or we judge your garden, and you can win an award. Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I like that setup for the story. Like I said, it's not completely logical.
Yeah, but it also tells you exactly what you know is going to happen, which is you're like, okay, well, the garden gnome's going to wreck McCall's house. Joe's going to get the blame, and he's going to be trying to prove they're alive. Fine.
Yeah, I'm watching too much Goosebumps.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe gives some shit back to McCall, though, takes the piss out of his military style. McCall warns Joe about being in his garden and suggests that should anything happen in his garden, he will blame Joe. And you're like, okay, well, I wonder what's going to happen here.
I just hope Joe here isn't planning to do anything to my garden. A sneak attack, maybe. At night, maybe.
That night, we get POV of something moving into McCall's garden, and we see whatever it is smashing his melons. This is where I think things get weird. Like, I know it's just like, why not? But like, growing melons in your garden, like, it's not flowers, not flower beds, it's not statues. He has all of that, and then it's just like, oh, no, but he's also grown melons, and that's a thing. Okay?
Yeah, just randomly melons. Like, they wanted them to have something called like Smash or something, and I don't know.
Yeah. The next morning, McCall angrily confronts the family and accuses Joe of smashing the melons. In particular, he says, like, you know, it must have been you, because he shows one melon that has a face having been drawn in marker or something like that, you know? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But what I was quite surprised why, he doesn't seem that mad about it. He just sort of tells them off, smashes a melon on the doorstep, and then walks off.
But I didn't go in the garden.
It's gonna take more than dirty tricks for you to win this contest.
You didn't like those melons anyway.
Yeah, like, think about it though, like, had like, you, like, what do you think? This kid come next door and smashed up his melons, you'd be like fucking fuming, like, properly. He's just a bit like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to grow a melon, but I imagine it takes like some time. And so, you know, from playing like Harvest Moon and stuff like that, but I don't know how long it really takes.
Later, Joe is watching the gnomes as Mindy arrives. She asks him to play like ring toss using the gnomes, Joe continues to do that trope of, I didn't do it, of course I didn't do it, and so on, while McCall watches and again warns Joe about his behavior. He insults the gnomes, but Joe ends up taking a closer look at the gnomes and notices black ink on one of its hand and a melon seed on its face. And this is the Night of the Living Dummy stuff. We did
it's exactly the same.
You know?
Exactly the same, for sure.
But that night, the episode, obviously short runtime, goes, well, look, it's time for us to let you in the know as we see the gnomes come to life. Here's a weird thing. There are parts of the coming to life that I don't mind. Normally when it's shot up close, because they still look like statues. And I was like, okay, it looks all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the makeup effects were decent.
Well, later it'll become a problem because we have to see them move around. And that becomes a problem. Joe wakes up as a dog is barking and he looks at the windows, but sees, and this is a weird part, right?
Weird.
He sees the gnomes are still there, but then seems to see 3 sets of red eyes in the bushes.
Yeah.
The problem for me with this is he doesn't react like that's scary. He kind of just goes, oh, okay, and sort of moves. Like, I wasn't even sure he saw them properly.
No, I literally wrote, got to love his lack of reaction to 3 pairs of bright red eyes staring back at him.
Exactly, right?
Like, he doesn't react. You think that should be something, like, if you looked out your window, middle of the night after hearing a strange sound and saw 3 sets of red eyes, you know, you'd be like, oh, that's a bit strange. And probably like freak out a bit.
Yeah, red eyes aren't quite a regular thing in life, you know? And even worse, his response to seeing that is to then just go outside. I'm like, what? Why would you do that?
Yep.
But in the backyard, he then finds the gnomes are gone, but approaches the red eyes. And we see a raccoon run into the bushes. And I was kind of like, so are you implying the red eyes was the raccoons?
I guess sometimes like nocturnal animals' eyes, they can glow, I suppose, in the night. So maybe that's what they're trying to insinuate, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess we'll buy it. It's also Joe can hear some weird noises coming from McCall's garden. He then sneaks in and we hear lots of noise, like little muttering, like of little like sound and stuff. And he ends up seeing the gnomes trashing the flowers. So this is where you kind of see the gnomes fully. And it's obviously they've hired a load of short people to dress in costumes. And the problem is when they move, you can quite clearly see its clothing.
Yeah, but I guess it does make sense because they've come to life. So I guess their outfits also would come to life. I don't know. I thought the effects weren't too bad, especially on their faces. They still kind of look like they have that sort of like porcelain look to them. I thought they did a decent job. And at least, they could have done like horrible little CGI little things, or I don't know. Thought it wasn't that bad.
I agree with you. It's nothing that got me particularly annoyed or frustrated about. I was just kind of like, okay, as you always do when we're reviewing these things, you're picking apart the smaller details, particularly in what feels like an episode, as I already said at the start, and particularly by the end, where I was just kind of like, I'll probably forget this one exists when it comes to even the tier ranking.
Yeah, probably will.
But the gnomes see him, and as they approach, motion lights and alarm start up. The gnomes freeze as McCall comes running down the stairs, seeing his garden is trashed, and of course, Joe is standing in the middle of it. It is not a good look.
My garden. What have you done?
But I didn't, sir. It was the gnomes. It was...
Little bastard.
Yeah. Joe tries to blame the gnomes, but of course, that goes fucking nowhere. Joe's dad arrives and McCall points out, look, I've caught him red-handed. Joe denies it and blames the gnomes, but even his father isn't going to listen to that. And he's told, look, you are going to fix every inch of McCall's garden, and then is sent back to the house. You know?
Yeah.
Not fair.
I had a bit of an issue with this, because in previous episodes where you have the trope of the boy who like cried wolf. That's a
Yep.
very common theme that runs throughout the entire like series. They usually like establish that the character has a history of pulling pranks, and then so people naturally, when it comes to him trying to convince them that something's happening, they don't believe him. But they don't really do that here. He seems like just a normal kid that doesn't normally do this kind of thing, and they're trying to and now he's trying to tell them, I know obviously it's ridiculous, of course, and
Yeah.
he's trying to like, they feel like he's trying to shirk the blame onto the gnomes or whatever sense that makes. Like, why would you, that sounds ludicrous, who would even suggest that? But like, yeah, they don't really establish that he's the type of character that does that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just like a little thing that maybe they missed out a bit.
Yeah, I feel like they've tried to replace that by suggesting that he has a long-standing rivalry with McCall. Obviously, McCall stealing or taking his stuff in Land's garden. There's a way they could have fixed that, though, and it would have taken maybe 10 seconds, 10 seconds, which is when McCall takes the baseball at the start of the episode. We see him go to a chest or something, open it up, put the ball in, and in there we see a collection of toys and things. So we instantly know the boy's lost a lot.
Yeah, because yeah, exactly. That'd be good, because then they'd show you that they have a long-running history of like a rivalry.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like suggested that he, doesn't like them in their garden and takes their balls and stuff like that, but it doesn't really like show you. So again, it doesn't make sense why he would want to cause such I mean, he's trying to help his dad to win the competition. I guess there's that, but again, they don't really show that like the kids are that invested in helping their dad win the competition or anything. Maybe if they were also equally as invested or something like that,
Agreed. And of course, it's a big step up, from, as you said, being a fairly normal kid who doesn't really do anything wrong to severe vandalism of a neighbor. Yeah,
like it gets to the point where it's just like, obviously there's no way they're going to believe him that it's the gnomes. I think that's it. You're supposed to think that. It's like such a ridiculous thing.
Well, unfortunately, it's a shame. They missed an opportunity to throw in another Goosebumps throat, which is after his rampant destruction. Why on earth? Why isn't therapy brought up?
Yeah,
Goosebumps loves therapy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The next day, Joe was working hard in McCall's garden while he patrolled all military style. He's even a part where he's like, right, to the Pentagon. I'm like, huh? And it just turns out to be a map, like a map of the design of the garden, but like a pentagon.
I kind of want to know how this guy ended up like this. Like, was he in the military? Did he serve? And how did he go from that to gardening, man? What's his story?
he kind of drops in something when he's pointing at the map and designing. He suggests that he's about to go into a war story, and then stops himself and says like, "No, back to work." And it's like, okay, so you have seen action then.
Yeah, some PTSD going on there, man. Definitely.
Yeah, so while Joe's working, Mindy's laughing at him from her hammock. She's relaxing and all that. Joe's continuing to blame the gnomes, but obviously even she doesn't believe it. But he says he'll prove it, and goes about setting this up in probably, it's like, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. So that night, he watches the gnomes come to life, and he has a video camera. He's ready with a video camera, plans to film it, but then goes, oh, I forgot to put a tape in.
Oh, come on.
The first thing he would have checked.
No.
Great, no tape.
Obviously, when he goes to get the tape and then puts one in and goes back, the gnomes are gone. So he goes to wake his father up. And this is where I was like, oh, there's a woman in bed with him.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, so the mother does exist in this episode.
Yeah.
We get some sort of comedic thing where the parents are too tired to listen and they're constantly mishearing what he says and like basically send him away.
Talking about that, actually, they missed a golden opportunity for a really funny gag there. They should have had the woman in bed next to the dad be like a female gnome.
Oh!
That could have been like the major twist, man. He's completely aware.
Yeah, oh God.
You think cahoots with the gnomes. Oh my God.
Or it's his kink.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe just one of the gnomes snuck into his bed because they've grown like an infatuation with the father or something like that, man. I don't know. Don't want to go too deep on it, obviously.
Joe ends up going and waking up Mindy instead and gets her to come with him. Outside, he brings her outside. The gnome's up there, and of course, she's just like, what are you doing, Joe? Why have you hidden the gnomes? That kind of thing. So, yeah, still no disbelief. But they hear noises and decide to follow. And the gnomes emerge from the bushes and confront the kids. I was a bit puzzled about this. as now there's just loads of gnomes.
Mm. Yeah, how many gnomes did he actually buy? I can't remember. I think just 2. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I don't really get it, because there's also a scene earlier on, and it's a flash scene. I'm going to go back to because it's kind of prompted in my head, where the gnomes are clearly solid statues that stand.
Yeah.
When Joe looks outside initially to see if they've moved, one of them is in a seated position with a fishing rod.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't really bring it up because I was like, okay, is that just them, the gnomes changing position, rather than like a mistake in the episode?
Mm-hmm.
But they get chased by the gnomes. The gnomes surround them and start to tease them. They're a bit like playful. They've got a video camera, what's your motivation, all that sort of thing in their face, and then start to argue about how they're going to kill the kids. They come up with all these, should we squish them? Should we do this? Should we do that? Their voices are kind of like high-pitched, Munchkin-esque.
Yeah. Did you think that, like, I thought one of the gnomes or one of the voices sounded kind of similar to Slappy? Like, I don't know if there's the same voice actor or what, but I thought it seemed, there was definitely something. I was like, oh, that kind of sounds quite similar, because especially you tie in the similarities to the Night of the Living Dummy. Yeah.
No, I mean, I didn't really notice. I didn't look at any of the voice actors either. Just pull the main cast out.
Yeah.
Squish them like bugs. That's stupid. Let it twist them like pretzel. No. Put a spell on them. A magic spell. No. Squish them. I know. We should squish them like bugs.
But they declare that their purpose is to create mischief, but end up actually fighting each other. While they're doing that, the flashlight is dropped, which ends up pointing at one of the gnomes, freezing it. And Joe realizes this is how they freeze. This is how they come to life at night, but light stops them moving, which does make sense considering the floodlights that exist in McCall's garden.
Yeah.
Joe grabs the torch and they start to use it to allow themselves to escape. Backing off towards a house, the torch begins to fail as the gnomes approach. So you kind of got this weird, like, he uses it like a gun almost, like a sight of a gun, and they're ducking behind bushes, and he's doing that, and so on. There's
some tension there.
I guess. They're surrounded and there appears to be no escape. Mindy falls over, but it turns out that they backed their way into McCall's garden. And of course, the light comes on and the alarm begins to sound. All the gnomes freeze as McCall comes running out and the kids run away. His garden is now filled with gnomes, so he's angry about it, picks up one of the gnomes, moves into the shadows where we see that gnome come to life and then seemingly attack him. Yeah, that's kind of where we fade away. As we then cut to some indeterminate amount of time later. I don't know if it's the next day or a week later or whatever. It had to be quite soon because otherwise you'd have noticed McCall had disappeared.
That's true, yeah.
But the garden competition is happening and the judges are walking around the family's garden. Now, the family are on tenterhooks here. The father's like that. The kid and the wife are holding on to him like, oh my God, is he going to win it? Like, it's a big deal.
Must be. Don't know if there's some kind of cash prize involved, but...
But yeah, the judges seem to like his garden, except when they go to this area that's behind some sort of fake giant Alice in Wonderland style mushrooms. And they sort of mutter about amongst themselves about seeing something back there that they don't seem to quite like and all that. We get a comedy moment where they go to tell him, look, we really like your garden. And he thinks he's won. So he starts giving off like a bit of a speech, a victory speech, about the award and all that. They're like, no, you haven't won because we loved your garden. But then we found that thing back there and it's so horrific and horrible. We didn't like it. So obviously you're like, oh, what's back there? And I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be McCall's gory body, isn't it? Like, murdered, right?
Well, not quite.
Obviously, the last couple of seconds, we go round to the back. And what do we see? We see a lawn gnome of McCall. He's been transformed into a lawn gnome. It's a fun, silly ending that, all right, mate, I don't get. But fine. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, It's one of those things where I always wonder if the ending of the book like was the same, or if maybe it was a bit more like something else. But yeah, it's fine. It seems in line with like the silliness of the episode on the whole. I think
Yeah.
it's a pretty silly episode overall, and it has a sort of like comedic edge. So I think it kind of like is appropriate. But yeah, I'm not sure that fate for the Major is necessarily completely deserved. It's kind of similar to the episode where the girl makes wishes, and then at the end of it, the other girl gets turned into a statue. It's like
Yeah.
that's quite a horrific conclusion to their lives. Yeah.
You are right when you put it that way. It almost seems undeserved. He literally just didn't want you fucking with his garden. You kept fucking with his garden, and he gets
Also,
transformed.
Yeah, I wonder if like is he like a proper garden gnome, like a normal one that doesn't come to life, or will he come back to life at night? Maybe there could be a sequel there, man. Yeah.
Sequel, man.
Yeah.
The Revenge of McCall the Garden Gnome. This episode, it's fine. I've got very little passion about it either or. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It sits so squarely in the middle for me, where I'm like, you know what? You're watching the series, you watch this. I think it's perfectly geared towards a child's mind, because its structure is so simple and easy to understand, and its scares are simplified stuff. There's nothing complex about it. So I think like for that, I can't really run it down.
No, I mean there's got to be someone out there that has a garden gnome phobia. So yeah.
Yeah, this is one where you just move on and go, okay, what's next in the series? But that is Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes. You got any thoughts on it? Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?